But of course, it's a big rival for Netflix, Amazon. And who's at Netflix?
Harry and Meghan, still. Hello and welcome to the Royals with me, Roya Nikar. And I'm here in Nepal. I'm travelling with the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, who are on a 6-day trip here, which means we've got a lot to unpack from this trip and a lot of other royal news, Kate.
We do. And while Roya is on a royal visit to Nepal, I'm here in the studio in London. But it's been a busy week here in the UK too. Prince Louie turns photographer as he captures a royal portrait of his mum, the Princess of Wales, which was released for World Cancer Day. Plus, move over Harry and Meghan. There's a new star in the streaming business. The King's debut in a new Amazon Prime documentary. But first to Roya. Hello, all the way over there.
Hello.
In Nepal for an official visit by the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, Prince Edward and Sophie. So how's it going? How's it been so far?
It's been good, thank you very much. We started in Kathmandu on Tuesday. We did 2 days in Kathmandu. We've just arrived in Pokhara, up in the mountains, which is just rather wonderful, actually. And we've just finished doing an engagement with them at the Gurkha Welfare Trust. So lots of learning about what that amazing organisation does for Gurkhas. And yeah, it's been a bit busy couple of days. I'm not complaining.
Well, no, it sounds wonderful. It sounds like a great trip. What set the scene for us? Because we've seen some lovely pictures earlier from kind of looking down the Kathmandu Valley. Yeah. And now you're in another glorious location. So what, the pictures look brilliant. They look very happy to be there. What's it like? What can you see?
Well, so the first, they arrived and we had a presidential handshake and meeting with the president and the first lady. And then a really busy day yesterday where Sophie and Edward split. So Prince Edward did a sort of day in Bhaktapur looking at sort of conservation and heritage. Then he went to an animation studio. Then at the end of the day, he gave out some awards to Duke of Edinburgh International Award Gold Award holders. And then Sophie did her own thing until they met up in the evening. So she had a busy day too. We went to maternity ward of Bhaktapur Hospital, and she met lots of mothers and their newborns and was literally wanting to hold all the babies. It was very sweet, actually. And that was interesting because that maternity wing is supported by the government, by the FCDO. So this whole trip is really designed to, obviously it's focused around what they're interested in, but it's also touching on our ties with Nepal, which I'll come on to. And then we went to something amazing, a place called Mighty Nepal, which is a charity that supports...
Mighty Nepal.
Mighty Nepal, yes, M-A-I-T-I, but pronounced mighty. Okay. And actually, the woman that runs it is mighty. And that charity supports women and children who have been the victims of human trafficking, women who've been the victims of sexual exploitation. It's been going for a long time.
And this is a place that the King visited, wasn't it? Before?
Exactly. The King visited in 1998. And that was very moving and very powerful. And obviously, Sophie is very, she supports a lot of causes that are focused around those issues. Then she had a private lunch.
They were asking about the King.
Yes.
I'm looking at this from afar. They were asking at the King, weren't they, at the engagement? And she had a kind of quite funny comment, didn't she?
She met this wonderful woman called Anita Shrestha, who has lived at the centre, Mighty Nepal, since she was a child. And it's an extraordinary place, and she now works in the sort of textiles area, and she'd made this handmade cushion for the King, and she explained to Sophie that she'd met him, and she showed the photo when he came all those years ago, and she was much younger, and she'd made this cushion and gave it to Sophie, who said, "I'll be absolutely sure he gets it," and had a very sweet card written in it saying, "I want you to know how much your visit all those years ago meant." And then she had a lunch with sort of inspirational women leaders who are pushing for change in Nepal. And then they met up sort of in the evening. Sophie and I did a reception together with lots of young people. Today's it was beautiful, actually. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say that she told people that people were saying, "What's the King like now?" And she said, "Oh, he's still the same."
Hasn't changed.
And mighty means, and I'd love to say this in my own work, but I'm being passed this note by the producer saying, mighty means mother's home in Nepalese, I'm told.
Well, there was
Which
a
is
real
significant,
feeling
isn't
there,
it?
yes, of nurturing and women and children being looked after. And it's really interesting, this trip. It's sort of it has all these different strands. When we first went to the presidential palace, we were reminded, of course, by people there and people working for the embassy that, and I had no idea about this, that Nepal is, and the UK is Nepal's oldest diplomatic relationship in the world. So
Oldest one of all of them.
of all of them, it's the country that Nepal has had diplomatic ties with and a sort of formal diplomatic relationship more than any others. So it's very important to them, which is why I think the king has been. Obviously, we had Prince Harry here in 2016. This is Sophie and Edward's first time here, and there's lots of different strands to it because obviously, as you and I both know, any official trip is always focused around the particular sort of interests of the principals, but also what does the government want to get out of it, and what does the Nepali government
of the visit, yeah,
exactly. And so there's a bit of that every day, every engagement, every step of the way,
and a hugely important connection to the UK as well, not just for the Nepalese, but also for us, and that must have come through in the Gurkha engagement.
It's interesting. So the first 2 days were very much focused on the individual causes that Sophie and Edward support. Now we've come to Pokhara, it's switched very much to military and Gurkha. So we came here this afternoon, and the last engagement this afternoon was with, at the Gurkha Welfare Trust, where actually it was rather wonderful. They met a 104-year-old Gurkha widow who's moved into residential care there. Her husband passed away a few years ago, but he served for 2 years, I think, in the Second World War, didn't qualify for a pension because you need 15 years in the Gurkhas to get a pension, but he's been supported by the trust for years. And then what was really nice right at the end was they met a lineup of Gurkhas who had served as orderlies in the royal household, including a couple who'd worked with the Queen.
Oh, really? The late Queen?
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth.
Did they have any kind of recollections to share? Or
some recollections may vary, Kate.
So how did you get there? Did you all bundle onto a military jet with the Duke and Duchess? Or
jet might be pushing it, Kate. Yeah.
What was it?
We had quite a day. So our day started in Kathmandu in the morning. Then we went up to the hills of Gadawari and went to these beautiful botanical gardens. Then we
and is it
back.
Just stunning, the view?
It was absolutely beautiful, sort of mountains in the background. And they planted their trees next to the trees that Prince Philip and the Queen had planted back in the 1990s. Then we raced back down to Kathmandu to the military airport, and we got on a tiny, tiny plane.
All of
us. All probably about 12 of us, with Sophie and Edward, flew through the bits of the Himalayas. They pointed out the Fishtail Mountain on the right, which was pretty cool. We had a female co-pilot, which I liked. Yes, and we jetted up to Pokhara, and now we're here for the next few days. It's really interesting for me to see the Edinburghs sort of on a trip like this. This is the first one of their overseas tours I've done. And, normally when you and I travel together, we travel with an enormous, great pack of us. This is much smaller. There's 2 reporters here, 2 photographers, no broadcast.
And there wasn't much notice before the trip, was there? They said, look, there's a couple of spaces for people who can make it. So great that you're there.
It's a different vibe. It's a different vipe to normal.
What are they like together? Because when they were planting the tree, we saw her say, keep going, darling. And he was he was joking. He was joking. It's the most exercise he'd had in ages planting this tree. What are they like together?
They've got a good rapport, actually. I mean, that engagement. They were sort of joking all the time because she was like, I want to plant, and he's like, you're doing the other one. There's nice banter between them. They look like they look like a couple who still have a laugh and a joke.
That's good to hear, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, I think so. And it's all a bit less formal.
We talked about last week. We were asked a question, weren't we, about how are the slimmed down monarchy, so say, going to continue into the next reign with so few members of the working royal family of a kind of age to carry on working? Well, this is the sort of answer, isn't it? Edward and Sophie, in their 60s, early 60s, trying to are filling that gap and seem to be doing a brilliant job.
Well, I thought about that again, actually, because obviously the last royal visit here we had was Prince Harry, who beyond anything changing massively, is not going to be here on official business again, because obviously he's no longer working royal. And also I was thinking about that with Prince Edward. He came here, actually he came a few days earlier, he came from India. He went to India on a 2-day official visit. And that's, again, I thought was quite interesting because I don't know what you think about it, Kate, but India is a very important diplomatic relationship with us in terms of trade and business. And, the King and Queen have been to India many times. One might have expected perhaps a bigger hitter to go to India, but it's, and that's no disrespect to Edward, but he's not as well known on the international circuit as the King, the Queen, William, Kate. But as you say, there are fewer working roles around now, and is it that we're just going to see Sophie and Edward do more of these overseas trips? Possibly.
And is she the glamour? I mean, the interest has been in Nepal. It wasn't, we saw a few pictures coming out of that brief visit to India. But she does bring that kind of, the glamour and the sort of showbiz to the royal jobs that they do, has to be said.
I'm not sure Prince Edward would disagree with you there.
She's bringing the sparkle. Oh, she looks great. The pictures are incredible.
So last night when they were at a youth reception, it was really interesting. We were sort of briefed that she wouldn't be in a, very fancy dress and jewellery because it was about young people and they wanted it to feel very informal and relaxed. And so she was wearing a sort of nice print cotton dress. But, it's a very low-key glamour, I think I would say. But glamour nonetheless, yes.
Yeah, she does it very well.
Yeah. Well, no, the photographers are delighted with how it's going for them.
Well, also, we've got Chris Jackson out there. We've been seeing his photographs dropping on the wires, the Getty photographer who he's very good and takes lots of glamorous shots. So there's been a lot of focus on her in his images.
Yes, there has. And actually it's really interesting watching how Edward and Sophie interact with the photographers and the media, because sometimes the photographers occasionally, feel like they'd like members of the royal family to be a bit more collaborative. And actually, today, when Edward was planting that tree with Sophie, he went out of his way to say, "Should we do it again? Would you like me to do it again?" And Sophie was corralling a load of children when she was planting a rhododendron, and literally spent 2 minutes rearranging them all, checking the photographers had got the shots they wanted. That's very different to what you and I normally see on engagements.
Yes, that's so interesting. How well they're there, this is and we don't always get offered reporter slots on these Edinburgh visits.
No, we don't.
So it's interesting. They're obviously, they want that to be publicised, and the whole kind of machinery around that, get my good side, not in a vain way, but to make sure.
Let's make this work.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get a shot that is actually going to work if you've made the effort to come out that way. So I think that's interesting. It might be other members of the royal family could take a leaf out of that. And I find that with the Queen, actually, with Camilla. I think she's always... Yes. I was there with her, a much less glamorous job this week in East London when she was opening a secondary school, more your kind of bread and butter style royal visit than trips up to the Kathmandu Valley. But she, she'll glance across. She'll make, she plays the game. She knows that, you've got to get a shot and you've got to get what you need as well. But she was a good sport. She raced a robotic car with an 11-year-old girl who, and the Queen won. And then she said, "Oh, thank you for letting me win," and all that sort of stuff. So, but she's another one I think who's aware. I remember when
Arthur
you and I
always
were
says
there,
that, doesn't he? Arthur Edwards, who we had on our podcast just before Christmas, always says that Camilla will go out of her way. And sometimes when the King doesn't want to do another photo, Camilla will rally him and say, "Come on, darling," and she makes it work. And that's why the photographers love her.
Now, this week we saw a different side of Prince Louie and a new and explored talent, shall we say. The 6-year-old prince took a royal portrait of his mother, the Princess of Wales, and it's the first official picture we've seen from the young royal. It's a photograph of Kate standing in the woodland at Windsor as the sun peeks through the trees. She's dressed up warm, wearing a hat, scarf, gloves, standing at the top of the hill, arms wide stretched, beaming down at Louie, who has taken the photograph.
The photo was released by Kensington Palace to mark World Cancer Day this week, alongside another image of frosted foliage at Windsor, taken by the princess with a message which read, "Don't forget to nurture all that which lies beyond the disease. Signed, C."
The King and Queen also shared a message on their social media channels to mark World Cancer Day. It read, "This World Cancer Day, we're sending love to all those navigating a cancer diagnosis, as well as the incredible doctors, nurses, charities and families who work tirelessly to support them."
So, little Louie's first official photograph. It's come quite early, hasn't it? But I get the sense that he's commandeers his mother's phone quite a lot in that picture.
Like the idea that he's just nicked the phone and scarpered down the hill, and then it's actually got quite a good image.
How much direction do you think he needed?
I love the picture of her standing there with her arms wide stretched. I just thought it was kind of, I love you this much, standing at the top of the hill, and more relaxed than we would, often see a royal portrait, of course. But I thought he did a pretty good job. These digital native children.
Well, yes. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's another sort of rung on the ladder of how the Waleses control their image. Because we know that, and you and I have talked about a lot, and we talk about a lot amongst the royal reporters and photographers, that increasingly they like taking, for these very landmark moments, they like taking, Kate likes taking photos. We've even had William take a couple of photos. Sometimes Kate will take photos for the children's birthdays. Other times they get photographers in. But I thought this was a really interesting departure, because obviously the message that Kate wanted to put out was, as part of her recovery, she looked quite free, didn't she? It was just a real freeing image of her sort of arms outstretched. And the fact that she entrusted little Louie to take that photograph rather than get a swanky photographer in felt all the more natural for it, I thought.
Yeah, and it's also combining two elements of her work as well. So although it was a kind of glimpse into family life, we had, it's a young boy, her youngest son, taking the image, and also commemorating World Cancer Day, because of course she had her chemotherapy last year. She recently went to see doctors at the Royal Marsden, where she thanked them for treating her. That's why she went for a treatment. And remember when she said, I really felt like I needed to get the sun, during her treatment. You need loads of water and loads of sunlight, almost comparing herself to a plant. And then here she is in the woods. But also that kind of early years element that, spending time with young people in their kind of formative years, which of course is another huge part of her work, particularly at the moment. And then the same two things, portraiture and young children. The following day, we saw her at the National Portrait Gallery doing just that, joining school kids on a minibus, to go and see a new installation at the gallery, of which she's patron. And all these things sort of combining together, these two elements of portraiture and young people. So I wondered how sort of choreographed that was, the idea that it all kind of ties into
everything came together.
Two strands coming together. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, we've been told, haven't we, and we've seen that already with the engagements she's done this week at the National Portrait Gallery and the announcement of the new report from her Centre for Early Childhood, that as part of this gradual return, that work is going to be her focus. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that image, yeah, you're right. It did sort of bring it all together, and in a much more natural, unstaged way, it brought all of that together, which was quite a clever way of doing it, actually.
And what did you think of the image itself? Do you think it was?
It just was very natural. It's really interesting to see the princess in that setting when she hasn't had hair and makeup, and a lot of thought hasn't gone into what she's wearing. I don't mean that in the wrong way, but just wearing an outdoor coat and boots, just looking much less like a princess and more like a mum out for a walk with her little boy who's commandeered her phone and taken an image of her where you can see that she feels free and happy to be on the road to recovery.
And nice to see those images, I think, where they obviously go through them and then think afterwards, actually, that would be quite a nice one to release, rather than getting the whole family dolled up for a shoot as such.
Yeah.
Although they have done that as well.
Little rare glimpse inside life at Adelaide Cottage.
And this may be the first official portrait taken by Prince Louis, but it isn't the first time we've seen the Wales children's creative side, have we?
No, because back in 2021, the children's Mother's Day cards were to their late Granny Diana, and they were shared on social media too. And in Princess Charlotte's card, which was decorated with a large heart and a mouse ballerina sticker, she wrote the message, "I love you very much, Papa is missing you."
Tearjerker. And a year later, 2022, the palace released a painting by Prince George. He was 9 at the time, and it showed a reindeer smiling in the snow, along with 2 robins and the caption, "Happy Christmas," and the words, "By George," so we all knew who'd done that.
George was here. None of which should come as a surprise, because of course their mother, the princess, is a very keen photographer, and also has a degree in art history from St Andrews University, where she met William. She's also patron of the National Portrait Gallery, the V&A, and the Royal Photographic Society.
So chances are we could see more photographs and paintings from the young Walesers in the future.
Should we see if we can get an exhibition of George, Charlotte and Louie's?
Well, soon there'll be enough. I was with the King this week and reminded that perhaps they inherit their talent from him because he has his watercolours. He was looking around a gallery at a Polish community centre and the curator said to him, "When are you going to bring yours in?" And he said, "Oh, I didn't know." And she said, "Oh, they're actually quite good. Why don't you bring some of your artwork in?" I think she was just kind of being flattering him. But
after he was here in Nepal in 1998 and he visited mighty Nepal, he sold one of his watercolours and raised money and gave it to the charity.
How much was it? Do you know? I'll have to look that up.
I think it was raised a few thousand pounds.
Oh, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, good for him.
Now, the Princess of Wales is making a gradual return to public duties in recent weeks. But there is one thing that's different. No details of her outfits have been issued by Kensington Palace. And that's because, in a significant move, as I reported last week, Kensington Palace will no longer release details of Kate's outfits because she wants the public focus of her work to be on substance, not style. And it's a move that has definitely divided opinion among royal watchers and fashionistas.
A palace source said, "There will always be an appreciation of what the princess is wearing from some of the public, and she gets that. But do we need to be officially always saying what she is wearing? No. The style is there, but it's about the substance." Although it's understood that the palace may still occasionally issue details of significant outfits or jewellery worn by the princess for the most important family and state events, but just not for her other public engagements. So, what has this had the desire that they wanted, I suppose? Because everyone's been talking about, after your story, everyone's been talking about her clothes, actually. And so in some ways it's had a kind of negative, it's sort of backfired on them, this strategy, hasn't it?
I've been absolutely intrigued by the different responses. It was interesting. On Sunday, in another Sunday newspaper, Alex Shulman, the former editor of Vogue, wrote a column about it and said, actually, I applaud this decision. And of course, Kate was in Vogue magazine a few years ago to mark the centenary of the magazine, and Alex Shulman was editing then. And Alex Shulman wrote in this piece saying, I commend her for it because she's more than a clothes horse. And, the focus should be on her work. But Alex Shulman made the point that a lot of people don't seem to be making and seem to have slightly missed, which is that this does not mean that Kate's going to stop championing British fashion. It doesn't mean that within 2 minutes of her appearing in public, the world and us won't know what she's wearing, because we've seen already since we do. There are so many royal watchers and so many fashionistas on social media who can identify outfits literally within, you and I know, seconds. We know which Twitter accounts to look at, which X accounts to look at. So I think the point really that they're trying to make and that is coming from the princess is she loves fashion. She understands how important fashion is to the economy. She understands there'll always be an appreciation of what she's wearing. She doesn't feel, and nor do the palace, that they have to be constantly giving out the details every single time she goes out because A, as we've just discussed, people can find that out very quickly, and B, I think she would just rather people focus much more on what she's doing. And I have to say, I thought her choice of outfit on her first public engagement after that story this week was really interesting. When she went to the National Portrait Gallery, it was very low-key.
Having said that, Hilary Rose in the Times said, "Nice try, Kate."
Didn't
you
work.
still look glamorous.
She
the
looked
kind
fantastic.
of mermaid hair that she has. The kind of she always looks gorgeous.
But,
anyway,
you wrote the other day. You wrote in your good story the other day about the royal warrants, that she's going to issue royal warrants, and you quoted, and I mentioned your quotes in the piece. You mentioned Catherine Zoraida, the jeweler, about the Kate effect, and how important that is on British fashion, British brands. And I think she is obviously incredibly aware of that. And that's not going to stop because Kensington Palace don't give us her fashion, what she's wearing.
No. It was interesting at the Queen's engagement this week. someone sort of sidled up to me and said, she's wearing a suit by Mr. Roy. And I said, oh, you're not joining the club then, where we have to look it up online instead. Or
they always give us the details, don't they? They always do what the Queen's wearing. She has 2 or 3 designers, Anna Valentine, Mr. Roy.
As did the late Queen, yeah.
But I think I sort of see where Kate's coming from. I think I mentioned in that piece something that someone said to me a couple of years ago when I did the profile of her when she was 40, that she found it really, really hard at times, particularly when she was starting out, that she'd go and do all these, engagements. She might go to a hospice, she might go and do something, people who are sort of very vulnerable, and all some of the media wrote about was her fashion. Now, I'd say that's changed now. It's not what everyone writes about. Certainly some areas of the media are very interested in what she's wearing, but that's not going to change just because Kensington Palace don't issue the details. But I can see why she's done it.
Also, I think this pause away from public life while she's had her cancer treatment has been an opportunity for the palace and her to reset, because this has sort of come off the back of that, hasn't it? I mean, she's spoken about how her cancer journey has given her a new perspective on everything and the importance of reflecting on the simple yet important things in life, which, while she has this passion for textiles and the fashion industry, as we've been told, she doesn't feel the need to kind of be the kind of clothes horse or going forwards. It's interesting. It's interesting how she's used that time away from to reflect on other things as well, and probably the stress of being somebody who everyone's looking at what she's wearing, won't have helped her, I don't think.
She's never enjoyed that attention. But she understands it goes to the job. And also, when we had the Qatar state visit here at the end of last year, the palace did tell us what she was wearing. They told us she was wearing Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen, and it was that maroon coat dress, which was the colour of the Qatari flag.
Exactly, the colour of the Qatari flag.
They told us she was wearing earrings and a choker that belonged to the late Queen. So we will, for the big state moments, I suspect, probably for things like Trooping the Colour, we may still get details of what she's wearing and for state visits. So it's not a fashion blackout, guys. It's not a fashion blackout. It's just focus on my work, not my wardrobe request.
But we're seeing more of her, I think, again. So this gradual return is gradually increasing, isn't it?
Do you think, actually, with that decision, Kate, do you think she'll make braver decisions now? Do you think she'll feel more emboldened to make decisions that she really wants to make that perhaps she held off on doing before?
I think everyone, I speak to, friends who've had cancer and things like that, when they are in remission, as she says she is now, there is that kind of, it's a chance to kind of let go of some of the stuff that you've worried about before, that frankly, once you've stared down the barrel of something like cancer, you can make braver decisions and do what you want to do, perhaps a bit more. So it'd be interesting to see how she kind of emerges from the cocoon, sort of butterfly-like, to do, Kate 2.0. I like it.
There's no shortage of stars in the royal family, whether it's Prince Louie as a budding photographer, or Kate making a fashion statement, or not. But there could be another TV star in the making, because as Kate reported last week, King Charles will star in a feature-length documentary for Amazon Prime on his charity work and environmentalism. It's going to focus on the philosophy the King outlined in his 2010 book, Harmony, A New Way of Looking at Our World.
Filming has already begun in January at Dumfries House in Scotland, and it's a big shift for the palace to work with an international production company rather than domestic outlets like the BBC and ITV.
The film will be out towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year. And it's understood that several platforms were consulted before Amazon was given the royal seal of approval. So, Kate, tell us more.
Well, this is the King, I think, cementing his legacy of everything he stands for, which over the years he doesn't realise. Which over the years I don't think he has been able to draw together under one thing. If you go back to his 2010 book, Harmony, A New Way of Looking at the World, there's a keys in there to how this documentary is going to come about. So it's all his views on all different things. And in there, he says it's time for a kind of dramatic revolution of way of helping the planet, helping communities. And it draws together all those strings of his interests over the years, which he says aren't disparate interests. They're all part of the same thing. So whether that's architecture, community, the way that people should live, the way that we should eat, the way that we should farm, everything everything we're doing wrong, essentially, and how we should bring that together. And it's a call to sort of change the world. It's sort of how it is. There's going to be interviews with him in there, but it's also going to be around the world. It's going to look at his work, not just in the UK, but overseas as well, which I think is interesting. So it's trying to establish the king and what he stands for and establish that legacy project, I think.
Yeah.
Not just in the UK where we know him quite well, but overseas. Hence why he's got this major streaming giant Amazon to do it rather than someone else.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you talk about the legacy, and given that he was the longest serving heir apparent in history, for the British monarchy, that legacy of him as the Prince of Wales is something that's incredibly important to him. And I think he's very keen that people don't forget, because he spent a very long time doing a lot of work in a lot of different areas, which he continues doing now, but in a completely different way as monarch. And so for him, I suppose this film, as you say, brings all of that together and will give people a sort of very slick but interesting look at what he's achieved in his 75 plus years now.
Yeah, I think that slick is the word.
No, he's 76.
He's 76 now, but yeah.
In what he's achieved in his 76 years.
Yeah, and I think slick is the word, because these are Hollywood budgets. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be something that's a huge, huge project for him. And of course, Amazon is an interesting choice as well. And I heard that, I was quite surprised in some ways, because they were the people who, of course, did the Royal Scandal series about his brother, Prince Andrew, which came out of the sort of dramatisation of Andrew's fall from grace. But of course, it's a big rival for Netflix, Amazon. And who's at Netflix?
Harry and Meghan.
Meghan still. So they have their big multi-million-dollar, multi-year project with Netflix. We're going to see the latest incarnation of that in March, when Meghan's delayed series comes out, delayed because of the LA fires, not through any fault of her own.
It's a very different kind of project to that, isn't it? So Meghan's, is an access series all about cooking and home entertaining. It'll be very glamorous and very polished. This, I'm sure, will be extremely polished, but it's different subject matter. It's really looking at the very worthy things that the king does. How interested in that do you think people will be?
I think they will, because it's the king. I mean, I did joke with somebody that maybe he should share his focaccia recipe with us to see.
Organic.
But I think his any kind of off the cuff moments with him, he's already had an hour with the filmmakers. This isn't going to come out until the end of the year or even start of 2026. It's going to be this major project. I think the bods at Amazon are going to make sure that it's not kind of dull and worthy, that it's going to have that kind of mass appeal, because it's going to go out to all different countries around the world. So I think that it can't be a snooze fest. It has to be, or it can't be a kind of vanity project either, because that will be that would defeat the purpose, I think.
Right, I reckon popcorn. You bring the popcorn.
Yes.
And maybe I'll bring the Buckingham Palace gin too. One to watch, Kate.
Yeah. Well, let's see. But now we asked all our wonderful listeners to get in touch with us on email for any ideas or anything you want us to cover in the show. We've had so many emails. Thank you to all of those who got in touch with us. But here's one from Scott in Northern Ireland. And Scott writes, "Dear Roya and Kate, you will be aware that the 9th of April this year will mark 20 years of marriage for the King and Queen. God willing, I trust this glorious occasion will be marked with a podcast looking back on one of the great love stories in our long royal history."
Well, Scott in Northern Ireland, it's definitely something that we'll be covering on the podcast, as well as plans they may have for their anniversary. And the palace just confirmed that the King and Queen will actually be in Italy on a state visit in early April, where they'll be meeting the Pope at the Vatican. So, more details on that soon. Keep an ear out for that, and we'll let you know more nearer the time.
And if you'd like to get in touch with us, our email is theroyals@thetimes.co.uk. But for now, Roya, over in Nepal, how's the rest of your trip looking? You're going to have dinner tonight,
Busy.
hopefully. And,
Yes. We've now landed. So in Pokhara. So I'll search out a snack tomorrow.
sounds lovely.
Tomorrow we've got a long military parade, but a very important military parade actually, which is when new recruits for the Gurkhas and their families it's called an attestation parade, and they go and it's the sort of official, you've made it, you get to train as a Gurkha, which is a big deal, really big deal for the Gurkha recruits and their families.
you have to be so tough to be a Gurkha.
You do, and it really
so
changes your life. The training is hardcore. It's hardcore. So Sophie and Ed will be there, and then a couple more days to go, and I think we'll see some very beautiful things. Lots of culture up here in mountainous region of Gandruk, which I last visited years ago. So I'm really excited to see how that's changed, and hopefully a colourful, interesting few more days of this trip, and a few nuggets hopefully to go into the Sunday Times.
Well, I look forward to reading all about it in the Sunday Times. So thanks, Roya. Safe travels.
See you next week.
Till next week. Bye.
Bye from Nepal.